Hello, my name is Tyler Young. I'm going to be presenting the article that was done by the group Scotland 1, as you may be able to tell by my outfit and the kilt I'm wearing, in which we study the article, The Establishment of Scots Language in Orkney, written by Ragnhild Ljosland. So language birth and the movement of a language to become common within a community is something that has fascinated linguists for ages. In Ljosland's article, The Establishment of Scots Language in Orkney, we read about the rise of the Scots language over the predominant language of the time in the Orkney Islands. The author does state there are still caveats in this knowledge, so this article should be read as a first but not last approach to the question of Scots establishment in the Orkney Islands. So my group will be taking a critical look at the research that was done by Ljosland. His research starts with the history of Scots language. The main language in the Orkney and Shetland Islands at the time was Norn, a split off from the Norse language brought by immigrants. The shift from the two languages can be seen going back as far as the 12th century. Around this time, the royal burghs were introduced as trade centers, with an early form of Scots being the language of work and trade. In 1379, Scotsmen worked their way into the ruling class as the Earl of Orkney, and again as the bishop in 1420. With Scots speakers taking such high positions within the government and the church, the language became more prestigious. In 1468, the Orkney Islands were pledged to Scotland by Norway, which Ljosland concludes sped up the development of Scots and the decline of Norn. Around this time, on the mainland of Scotland, Scot began to be used more often for government affairs. The Scots language began to flourish until the introduction of the Bible, which was in English in 1560. Between this and the establishment of schools in the 1700s, English became the most sought-after language to speak. Some believe that this led to the death of Norn and the dialectization of Scots. Ljosland argues that school attendance couldn't be entirely to blame for the death of Norn, stating, however, it would have been a direct changeover to English with the Norn substratum, also stating instead that Scots must have been a dominant language before the drop of Norn. Ljosland tries to prove that the Orkney dialect and the archaic forms of Scots through the lack of the auxiliary do verb. Although his lack of evidence is unconvincing. Ljosland said that he preferred using 19th and 20th century texts because these texts are the earliest I've been able to find. Proving that this language has archaic features would have needed support from texts older than this time period. Other forms of English today have similar do auxiliary drops. Rendering this argument that Scots was established in the 13th century void. Ljosland also uses grasped by Ellegard on similar growth of do auxiliary verbs in Middle English. He does state, however, that this is unclear if this should reflect the shift because it all depends on whether Ellegard's finds are applicable to Scots. And later says, my argument is therefore very tentative and more an airing of ideas rather than any final proof. So while Ljosland's article diagrams the history of the Scots language from its beginnings to its eventual decline, his research on the shift is based purely on estimations and on research from other languages. If we want to truly understand the timeline of the Scots language, there would need to be more data and research done. As he himself said on the very first page of his article, this article should be read as a first, but not last approach to the question of Scots establishment in the Orkney Islands.